I'm back again with the Swiss Army knife of Apple computers, the mid-2007 iMac, which can run all the way from Tiger to Sonoma with no modifications other than a CPU upgrade. Let's go. Anyway, guys, I'm Greg Hrutkay at Hrutkay Mods, and welcome to another episode where we are going to be once again visiting the mid-2007 iMac, which is right in front of me, which we've done this whole playlist up of multiple different videos of this running every operating system that Apple's ever produced for an Intel Mac. And this system is a very useful system, and I'd like to quickly address that, yes, the early 2008 Macs can also run Tiger, but they have a lot of driver issues, and they never natively supported Tiger, where this does. So with a CPU upgrade, you can run Tiger all the way to Sequoia, actually. This should be able to boot Sequoia with no issue. So that enables this thing to run 15 different operating systems. And I came to the realization back in October that this system has supported 14 operating systems, 7 officially and 7 unofficially with the CPU upgrade. So we're going to visit those 3 different operating systems. The one that it supported first, Tiger, then El Capitan, which was the last one it supported, and then Sonoma, which is what it's running right now, and comparing the differences between them. And then I'd like to also talk about the operating systems I'd recommend running on this, and we'll quickly go over those also. So let's get to it. Hey guys, I apparently can't count, so I thought I'd make this video real quick. There's actually 8 supported operating systems and 8 unsupported operating systems, plus Sequoia now, so that's a grand total of 17 operating systems. So from Tiger to El Capitan and then Sierra to Sonoma, each are 8. A little confusing for me, and it's like 5 in the morning, so I'm a little tired, and I was a little tired while I was filming that, and I can't count worth a darn, so yeah. So hello guys, welcome to Tiger. This was the very first operating system this system supported. It, I think, originally supported 10.4.9 or 10. I think it was 10.4.10. This was really literally at the tail end of Tiger support. And Tiger was the first operating system Intel Macs had, and this is really the best operating system you could get for a PowerPC Mac. And of course, Tiger was a system that had 2 different versions, a PowerPC version and an Intel version. After that, they were all universal binary and could run on either one up until, well, I guess Leopard was really the only one. That and the server versions, including the Tiger version of server, had a universal binary, but the official consumer version had 2 separate binaries. And this system was the last of the old school OSes. It still had the pinstriping on it. It had the brushed metal look to it, which very old school, very classic. This was a great operating system for PowerPC, but not really for Intel. And a lot of people who have nostalgic views on Tiger may actually argue with me that it was a very good Intel operating system. In my opinion, it really wasn't, because even though it ran a lot of OS applications and stuff, you know, they were mostly written for PowerPC. It wasn't until Leopard that people started really making universal binary apps that supported Intel CPUs. So you were running an emulation a lot on Tiger, and it would slow it down a little bit, because honestly, Tiger on Intel Macs running Tiger programs and stuff ran a little slower than a lot of PowerPCs, because they still had to emulate them. And it kind of bottlenecked it, because there were no really native Intel codes for them. But this system had a lot of neat things, you know, like dashboard, and this was the first operating system that actually had dashboard. There's not much else to say about Tiger. It's Tiger. It's just old and not very useful, in my opinion, for an Intel Mac. It's my opinion. If you don't, agree with me, so be it. But this is Tiger. And once again, if you notice, it says 700 megahertz Intel Core Duo. That's because it's got the upgraded CPU, so it would run Sierra and later. And the microcode in this isn't supported for this CPU, so it reads the wrong speed, but it's running at the stock 2.6. I think it's 2.66 on this CPU. It just reads it wrong. But this is Tiger. So let's hop on over to the next operating system, which was the last officially supported operating system for this system, and that would be El Capitan. And welcome to El Capitan, the very last officially supported operating system for this system, which was 7 operating systems after Tiger. And this operating system right here is the second OS that I really started getting to use. This is the one where I spend most of my time for the first few years of the channel coming back on. I started out with Yosemite on my mid-2009 or early 2009 MacBook, and then upgraded to El Capitan and got my 1,1 Mac Pro, and, well, that's where the story really started with the channel coming back. El Capitan and I have a very close personal connection here, lots of good memories here, and this is the last OS this system officially supported. In fact, this is the last OS the original CPU supported also. And, I mean, it's El Capitan. You had Launchpad and all that stuff. And, it looked way different. No more Scudamorphic or anything like that. It's El Capitan. It did what it needed to do, and it's still a very good operating system considering it's not really supported anymore. And there's a lot of issues now because if you want to keep using El Capitan, there's really no browsers left for it that support it. And it's just a little more difficult to use in a modern day world. But for its time, this was probably one of the most stable and best operating systems. But then again, I'm looking through rose-colored glasses here because I spent a lot of time on El Capitan. But it was a very, very good operating system, and I really enjoyed using it. And it just did everything it needed to do. And it was really quick and speedy, even on older hardware. And this was the last one that even supported 32-bit EFI Max with the boot.efi file and a few little patches here and there. And yeah, it was a very good operating system. It was a great way to really send out systems like this. The thing is, this has an upgraded CPU with SSE 4.1 on it. So that means we can run Sierra and later on it. And we're going to go 7 operating systems in the future and hop on to Sonoma and show you the difference between them. So let's do that. So before we boot into Sonoma here, you may notice that I'm booting off a USB drive, and that's because the built-in OpenCore Legacy patcher on the main hard drive was based off of the .46, and I hadn't used OpenCore Legacy patcher on this thing since January of 2022, when the last video on this thing came out, and updating from .46 to 1.5, it still doesn't work. I'll have to wipe the whole thing. It takes over a week to set this whole thing back up. So I decided we'll just boot it externally. So we're booting off of OpenCore Legacy Patcher externally with the installer drive. But it's on here. It's natively installed onto the hard drive. It just doesn't boot with the OpenCore that's on it. For some reason, it freezes up. In fact, the other 2 operating systems that I have on here that haven't been updated since .46 still won't boot. And one of them happens to be one I'm going to be showing you guys, aka I'm not going to be showing you guys on this system. In fact, we're just probably going to skip it and we'll talk about it. But we'll let it boot up here. And as it boots up, you'll notice it's going to take a very long time. In fact, I'm going to speed this up because anything past about El Capitan, I recommend, especially when you're going to like Mojave and later, I really recommend going to an SSD. SSDs will make this thing scream. But with the mechanical hard drive that's in it, it's so slow. It's unbelievably slow, and it's actually booting up a lot quicker than I figured it would. So we may actually have it boot up before I finish talking about this. But yeah, it's very, very slow, and it's still booting. Yep, still booting. SSDs make a huge difference. And I will be upgrading this thing finally to an SSD because I can't handle how slow it is. Ooh. Still booting. Now, once everything's loaded up on here, it's pretty quick. But getting it to load up here, it takes a while. And we are mostly booted up as we speak. And here we are in, it froze again. It's the hard drive, people. Sure, the CPU is not extremely powerful, but yeah, it's definitely the hard drive. This hard drive is a killer. It's still actually loading stuff. But here we are. We are in Sonoma, and it is running. And if we go to system information, we can see this is still the same system as we can see here. And it still works fully, 100%, no problem whatsoever. Sonoma is a very good operating system, but of course it's a metal-supported operating system, which means not everything works in it. App-wise. If it's a metal-based app, it just will not run in Sonoma, nor anything from Mojave on. If it's a metal-based app, will it run. But, of course, this is still a good operating system for web browsing and all that stuff. And it can still do web browsing totally fine. If we open up Safari, and this is actually the first time I've opened up Safari on this since I've installed this. It's going to eventually load Safari. Yes, it's kind of slow, but it does what it needs to do. It's just not what I'd call fast. Oh boy. We actually need to definitely put an SSD on this and show you how fast it really is with an SSD. Because without it, it's very painful. Oh boy, I think it's still loading. Oh, this is bad. But there's YouTube. This will still do everything you need it to do. And this will show an ad beforehand.
Building your online business? Go to Wix.com and set up your...
As you can tell, it's still pretty darn quick. Connect this eGPU to this Mac Mini. That's not right. To this 2013. It works. Let's go. And as you can see, it's fairly quick, especially after everything finally loads. Everything just works. We can open up other things like system settings. And it's amazing to think that this thing can run 14 different operating systems. This is 14 different operating systems after Tiger, and it just works. kind of slow, but it does what it needs to do, and it does it quick enough where it wouldn't drive you totally insane, especially if you had an SSD. With a hard drive, you may want to walk away from it while it's loading because it will drive you insane. So yeah. But yes, we are in Sonoma, and it still works totally fine. For the most part. Come on. There we go. See? Yeah, I need to put an SSD in this. There's no getting around it. It needs an SSD. But it works, and it does what it needs to do, and everything just works, which is awesome. So, now let's quickly talk about the operating systems I'd recommend running on this system and take it from there. All right, so you've got yourself a mid-2007 iMac, or even an early 2008 iMac, or even the early 2009 iMac, and you want to run some operating systems on it. The very first one that I would recommend, especially if you're planning on dual booting or triple booting or quadruple booting or however many 14 booting is, operating systems on this thing. This is one of the essential operating systems I'd recommend. And of course, I am talking about Snow Leopard, which was the very last OS that supported PowerPC apps. So if you have any old school OSes that you want to run on it, apps, you can definitely run it on Snow Leopard. And Snow Leopard was very streamlined, very quick. It was rewritten from the ground up just to work. And as you can tell, this is on a hard drive, and it loads everything super quick. Snow Leopard is still one of the best Mac operating systems ever made, and it shows. It's very streamlined. It's very quick. It's right now caching everything, as you can see up here for indexing, and it's not chugging along. It's just doing what it needs to do, and it's doing it quick. So if you have anything that you want to run under Rosetta, you can do it on Snow Leopard. I recommend running it if you can. All right, let's get to the next one. Okay, so if you're wanting to run 100% natively hardware-supported OS without having to worry about metal support or anything like that, this was the last operating system that 100% supported every bit of hardware in this system. So if you had a mid-2007 with an upgraded CPU, or 2008 or 2009 iMac, and you wanted something that you didn't have to worry about having metal support for something, you need High Sierra. This was the last OS that did not need metal. And with the DOS Dude patcher, it installs and then it just makes it completely native. Everything on this just works, and it works perfectly fine. And it's still very modern enough where you can still get fairly recent, web browsers and stuff on it, and it will do the job, and it does it pretty darn quick. This hardware is similar to for instance, 2010 Mac that had a Core 2 Duo in it. The hardware is quite similar, so it would just work. And those systems supported up to High Sierra, and this should have also, honestly. But Apple killed off everything mid-2009, back basically in El Capitan. High Sierra is a very good operating system. It's one of my favorites also, and this is running Firefox ESR, and it just works. Loads right up and does everything it needs to do, and we are running 115, which is not super recent, but it's an ESR of it, and it just works. Loads right up. Everything about it works. And it's High Sierra. It's a very good operating system. So let's go to the next suggested OS. All right, so this operating system's kind of a tie for another suggested one. And I am talking about Mojave. Mojave was the very last OS that supported 32-bit Mac apps. And It's a very good operating system. This is one of my favorites of all time. And of course, it is a natively metal OS, so it has to be patched to support non-metal. But this is one of the first operating systems, one of the last operating systems where it really didn't matter if you had metal or not. It really didn't support any native apps that needed metal. So you could run about anything and it would just work. And you could run older versions of apps and they would just work in Mojave. And I'm not going to show you the other one that I suggest, and that's Catalina. Catalina is a love-hate relationship with me. I really never liked the style with the rounded icons and stuff, and no one else really did either. But Catalina was the very first 64-bit only OS, and yet it was the very last OS that you could actually run on this thing without an SSD, and it still worked quite well. It would be a little sluggish, but it still supported a hard drive and still worked great with a hard drive, where anything past Catalina, like Big Sur and later, yeah, you really can't run without an SSD. It's just too slow and sluggish. But that's where we go to the next OS that I suggest, and that would be Big Sur, which we would boot up on this, but it's corrupted on here, and I'm not spending the time to try to get it to reinstall. Big Sur was the very last OS that supported IDE drives, and this happens to have an optical drive in it that is IDE. So if you want to use your optical drive, you have to have Big Sur or older. Anything past that, Monterey, Ventura, etc., did not support IDE drives, even though for some reason under system report, it will still show you ATA. It just does not support ATA. So you can't use your optical drive past that. But if you're fine with using, like, for instance, an external super drive or something, if you need your disks, you can go later. As long as you're running an SSD, I'd really recommend upgrading to one. You can run later, and that's where the final suggestion is. Run whatever you want. It will run on this. It may be a little slow, but it will still do everything you need it to do, other than the fact that basically anything past about Catalina, there's some native built-in apps that require metal, so you can't use all the apps and make them all work that are native. But you can still get apps that do work without metal requirements, and they work fine. So, for instance, this is running Sonoma. It can run Sonoma, and it works fine. So keep that in mind. Anyway, let's wrap up the video. So yeah, guys, while this thing spends another year booting back into Sonoma here, let's wrap up this video. Here is the system that can now run 15 different Intel operating systems, and we managed to demonstrate 14 of them in a really brief moment here. We didn't, of course, go through them all, but we managed to show the first one it supported, the 7th one it supported, and the 14th one it supported. And we talked about ones that I'd recommend running on this if you're wanting to multi-boot and etc., etc. This thing's still a great Swiss Army knife of a computer. And after you watch that playlist on this, if you haven't already, that I linked up there earlier, definitely go out and check out my friend Mark's channel, where he actually took one of these things and put a modern day RX 580, I believe it was, on this thing, which is insane. Check out this link up right here, where he connects an RX 580 to this thing and plays video games with it. These systems are still very useful, and they're still amazing systems, and you can get them really cheap. You can even get them for free. People don't want them, but with a quick, brief upgrade with the CPU and stuff, you can still run the most recent operating system on this. And sure, you can only go up to 6 gigs of RAM, but that's still plenty enough, especially with an SSD. This thing will scream with an SSD, and I can't wait to actually experiment with an SSD, because the experience would be so much less frustrating and painfully slow. So slow. You would not believe how slow it is. It's still loading. In all this time we've been talking, yeah, it's slow. With anything past about Catalina, it's just unbearably slow. And that's all because the hard drive. Newer OSs were meant for SSDs. You should not run a newer OS on a hard drive, which I made that mistake with this. I should have upgraded that with an SSD because it's so painfully slow. It takes like a solid 5 minutes to boot into Ventura. Once it's loaded, it's fine, but you constantly hear it seeking the hard drive, and this is the second way. It's killing the hard drive. Yeah, but it still runs it, and it runs it well once it's booted. And especially if it had an SSD, it would even run it better. But anyway, yeah, the mid-2007 iMac, the Swiss Army knife of Apple. This is the most amazing Mac I think they ever made, just because of what it can do. And all the OSs it supports. It's amazing. So yeah, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. And don't forget, I have a Patreon and channel memberships. If you want to join me, please check the associated links, etc., etc. And that's the end of today's video. This has been a Hrutkay Mods video.